Thank you. The gentlewoman from Iowa, Mrs. Axne, who is also the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Chair Powell, for being here. It's good to see you. We've been talking inflation, of course. We know it's hurting Iowa families and families across the country, and all of us here have an absolute responsibility to address this. And I appreciate the comments of my colleague, Representative Himes, because I've sure heard a lot of talk about how bad inflation is from my colleagues over there on the other side of the aisle, but I sure haven't heard much about the solutions that they want to provide. So I'm here to work on those solutions, and I'm glad to have you here to talk with us about that. We actually need to reduce inflation, and we've got to figure out what's driving it. So the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank just put out some research yesterday looking at how much inflation was driven by supply versus demand. What they found was that supply factors are responsible for more than half of the current level of inflation. And of course, I don't need to tell you that while prices increasing are hurting people across a heck of a lot of sectors, gas prices have really been driven up over the last few months. So, Chair Powell, on gas prices, could you talk about some of the supply constraints that have pushed gas and energy prices higher recently?
Sure. So, two big things would be just one, the price of oil is set globally, that's one. So we just take that price, and the second piece of it is the spread that refiners earn. So if refinery is at capacity and spreads are high, then you have a high spread there, and we know that the price of oil went up quite a bit. Started going up early in the year, and it's now come down a little bit in the last week or so. But those are the two things that have contributed to the spike in gas prices that we saw. We did see gas prices moving up, but they really moved up quite sharply beginning in the early parts of this year as the war came into focus.
Thank you. So you talked about, a couple of pieces where folks are making more money, and you talked about the refining process and that crack spread, and I think they're around $60 right now. So basically what's happening is they're making more money because supply is down. So would you agree that increasing the supply of gas could meaningfully lower prices?
I'd say it's hard to argue with that. Sure.
Okay. Well, the U.S. hasn't built a major refinery since 1977. So, of course, as we know, this isn't a recent issue. It's a long-term lack of investment. And so with so many parts of our economy, and you actually touched on that earlier. Now, here's the question I'd like to ask you. Will raising interest rates help increase supply here with fuel? And are there other economic tools to do that?
No, we can't have any effect on the price of oil or certainly the supply of energy. And the tools are in the hands; they're not in our hands.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So I know that the Fed absolutely wants to play a role in bringing inflation down, but I want to make sure that we are looking at those solutions and trying to understand what better tools we have. Are there better options out there that you could suggest right here?
Honestly, we're an agency with a narrow but important mandate and a set of tools, and our focus is on using our tools. We think there's a job to do on demand, and I don't see us giving advice to Congress or other agencies on how they might use their tools.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and hopefully at some other time we can talk a little bit further about that. I want to move on to housing here as well. In the 2010s, we saw less homes built than each of the previous 4 decades, and we're more than 5 million homes short of where we should be. Boy, do I see that all over Iowa, in small towns in particular as well. I've talked to businesses that want to expand, but they can't do so because there are not enough houses there. And so housing is one of the most sensitive areas relative to interest rates. So I want to ask the same thing here. Will raising interest rates help supply there? And are there other tools that we should be looking at to do that?
So I would agree with you. There's a problem with longer-term housing supply and the difficulty of creating adequate housing. What our tools can do is they can, in the near term and medium term, they can restore a better balance between demand and supply in the housing market. You've had extraordinarily high housing price increases really across the country over the last couple of years, and that's because of a lot of demand and very low rates. And you're seeing the housing sector slow down to some extent because of higher mortgage rates now.
And so do you have anything that we should be on our radar or that we could be looking to do to assist with this?
You know, I do think that these are issues for Congress around housing supply. If you talk to builders, and we do talk to builders, we had a group in last week, they will talk about the longer term issues, lack of supply of lots, lack of workers, lack of appropriate zoning and things like that. I mean, these are national issues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.